Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Matthew Yeomans and Stacey Tourout. First I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Matthew Peter Yeomans and Stacey Tourout were born in the 1990s and lived in Nanaimo, British Columbia. The couple started dating in 2019. 2 years earlier, Matthew had been inspired by a solar eclipse in Oregon and wanted to go see another one in Argentina in 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that never happened, but it caused Matthew and Stacey to think about what kind of vehicle it would take to make that trip to Argentina. The couple wanted to have off-road adventures in a capable 4x4 vehicle that could also double as a camper. This type of unusual vehicle was not widely available, so they decided to build one of their own. To pay for the project, which ultimately cost over $25,000, the couple used a variety of sources of money. Stacey had a cleaning business, Matthew bought and sold Toyota trucks for profit, and worked as a videographer. The couple also took out a loan. They started the project with a 1976 Toyota Chinook, which they purchased in July 2021. This two-wheel drive RV was equipped with a 2.2-liter four-cylinder engine that generated around 96 horsepower. The couple believed this vehicle was a good place to start because the camper portion had a functional living space with a pop-up roof. Some aspects of the vehicle were clearly not acceptable, like the two-wheel drive and the four-cylinder engine. To remedy this situation, the couple purchased a 1996 Land Cruiser chassis and installed it under the Chinook. Power was supplied by a 5VZ FE V6 engine from a Gen 1 Toyota Tacoma. The R151F manual transmission also came from a Tacoma. Working with a friend, it took the couple 100 days to modify the vehicle. They called it the world's first Land Cruiser Chinook. They named the vehicle Sunday, as in the first day of the week. To document the build and amazing journeys they would take in this unusual vehicle, the couple established a social media presence under the name Toyota Worldrunners. This included a YouTube channel, an Instagram account, and their own website. The couple uploaded videos about trips to various countries, including Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, New Zealand, and of course their home country of Canada. They took in amazing views, met all types of people, had some frightening adventures, and frequently broke down. The Land Cruiser was plagued by fuel pump problems because Matthew had installed an aftermarket inline fuel pump instead of using the stock in-tank unit. The fuel pump was the only component of the vehicle that was not made by Toyota. In April 2024, Matthew and Stacey became engaged while they were in South America. On social media, Matthew wrote, quote, "After our first date, I knew I could spend my life with this girl. Driving the length of the Americas in a rig that we built has made us into a remarkable team," unquote. Matthew left the engagement ring in Canada, so he drew a ring on Stacey's finger with a Sharpie. He thought this would be a good story to tell their future children. Matthew and Stacey enjoyed incredible success on social media. Their YouTube channel grew to 200,000 subscribers, and they had 80,000 followers on Instagram. In January 2025, Matthew and Stacey were featured in an article in their hometown, which indicated they had traveled through 17 countries in 17 months. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On August 7, 2025, Matthew and Stacey were driving off-road in British Columbia. They were on the Purcell Range, which has an elevation of 7,000 feet. Media reports did not specify which truck they were driving. According to the couple's website, they owned several Toyota trucks, so I assume it was a Toyota. At one point, when they were on Silver Cup Ridge near Trout Lake, they lost control of their vehicle on rough terrain. At least that's what the authorities believe happened. The vehicle rolled 650 feet down a steep mountain. Officials would later say the vehicle rolled many, many times. A motorist drove to Trout Lake Village and used the home phone of a local resident to call 911 at 7:30 p.m. Emergency responders arrived on the scene using a helicopter. They found Matthew dead. Stacey was away from the crash site, severely injured and disoriented. She was flown to Nakusp Hospital, where she died later that evening. The vehicle involved in the collision was completely destroyed. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. It's not clear exactly what caused the collision that killed Matthew and Stacey, although the available evidence suggests that there were preventable risk factors. As I mentioned, the type of vehicle the couple was driving was not specified, although I'm pretty sure it was a Toyota. Based on the videos that I watched on the couple's YouTube channel, it did not appear as though any of their vehicles were equipped with a roll cage. Also, I did not see them wearing helmets or using 5-point harnesses. It is critical to use this trio of safety equipment together. When this is done, off-roading becomes a lot safer. There is something else that occurs to me as far as increasing the level of safety. It's important for those who drive off-road to plan for failure. If a person is navigating terrain where rolling over is possible, they must consider what they might roll into. It's one thing for a vehicle to simply go on its side. This type of incident will cause damage, but it's usually survivable. It's something else for a vehicle to roll over into water, into a person, into another vehicle, or hundreds of feet down a mountain. If rolling over was a possibility, why were Matthew and Stacey driving so close to a mountain's edge? Experienced off-road drivers, like them, know the importance of positioning. It's critical to avoid driving in a place where a rollover would not be survivable. No one wants a single rollover to transform into a multi-rollover plunge. Again, one must plan for failure. Perhaps the authorities will reveal more details about the collision and clear up this mystery. It's always possible that something very unexpected happened, like some type of mechanical failure that caused the rollover. Item number 2, Matthew and Stacey had a love of adventure. On their trips, they visited many places where tourists don't typically go. This can be both a good thing and a bad thing. On the plus side, the couple was able to view amazing scenes like mountains, valleys, rivers, and forests. Stacey indicated there were moments when she just had to pinch herself. She would ask herself, "What am I doing?" They even saw creatures that were once believed to be extinct. For example, a payphone. I was left with the impression that Matthew and Stacey genuinely appreciated the beauty of the natural world. They were always curious and eager for the next adventure. On the negative side, the couple traveled through some pretty dangerous areas and stood out as easy targets. One time when they were in Colombia, they were approached by 2 teenagers, one of whom pulled a knife. Fortunately, Matthew managed to scare him away, and no one was injured. The couple said that people warned them they were going to die at some point during their adventure. It's not clear if these people were referring to dying from foul play or dying in a crash. Maybe they were referring to both risks. The couple could have easily been killed several times. In their videos, they acknowledged the risk they were taking, but it never seemed to bother them. Item number 3, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Matthew was intellectually curious, had a strong desire for freedom, and rejected many conventional aspects of modern society. For instance, he did not favor traditional employment because he did not want people telling him what to do or when to do it. This attitude led to Matthew having a lot of time on his hands. He used this time to learn about Toyota pickup trucks. This topic inspired him because these trucks represented freedom and adventure. They were machines that could journey deep into the wilderness, taking Matthew away from the mundane. Matthew became very knowledgeable about these vehicles, especially considering he did not have formal training as a mechanic. When Matthew met Stacey, she was inspired and enthralled by his carefree attitude. She was more conventional in her thinking, but found herself lost in Matthew's dreams about a life of adventure. When Stacey moved into Matthew's residence, the couple was only paying $650 a month in rent. The place was pretty small, and their lifestyle was Spartan and boring. When Matthew talked about his vision of traveling around the world, this was appealing to Stacey. She wanted to escape the boredom, she desired adventure, and in her way of thinking, being on the road would not be any worse than staying where they were. They would be trading one small place for another small place. When looking at the couple's desires, a relatively easy solution becomes apparent. They could have simply modified a Toyota Tacoma for extreme off-road use and carried a tent in the bed. There was no reason to have a vehicle with both 4x4 capability and an RV body when 4x4 is all they really needed. There is a reason that 4x4 RVs are not widely available. If they were in demand, manufacturers would produce them. It's not exactly clear why the couple was so dead set on building this unusual vehicle. Perhaps they liked the idea of a proper RV body as opposed to sleeping in a tent. After all, the RV would be more comfortable. Living there would grant an experience closer to living in a standard home. For instance, the RV had a kitchenette. Whatever the reason, the couple became fixated on this idea of building this special vehicle. They quickly realized that money was going to be a major problem. The initial funding for the project came from Stacey. She had saved about $10,000 from her cleaning business. Matthew kept buying and selling trucks for profit and performing freelance work to make money. He said that he tried just about every online money-making scheme available. Eventually, the couple realized that they could document their experiences and post it on social media. This way, they could generate money while enjoying the adventure. This strategy was largely successful. Their YouTube channel grew significantly, and they made enough money to stay afloat financially as they traveled to several countries. During one video, where the couple explained how they made it all work, I was left with the sense that they truly believed they had figured out the meaning of life and how to win at life. They were able to have phenomenal levels of enjoyment and freedom without stressing about money. They were living the dream. Unfortunately, the same impulsivity and free spirit attitude that enabled their success created some risk. I think this is what could have led to the fatal collision. The couple had become accustomed to living life their own way and not necessarily following all the rules. It is possible to be frugal without being irresponsible, but it is a delicate balance that not everyone can manage. They could have installed the proper safety equipment on their off-road vehicles, but they chose not to. At least it appears that way based on the available evidence. Now moving to my final thoughts. I think Matthew and Stacey had a lot of interesting ideas that appealed to many people, but they just needed to control their risk a little better. There is no question they were extremely likable. In watching several of their videos, I was left with the impression that they were good-natured, well-adjusted, and fun-loving individuals. I am not at all surprised they had a lot of followers and a large circle of friends. The couple used social media to share their adventure and to pay bills, but they were not chasing fame. This was not about narcissism, arrogance, or grandiosity. It was about living a life of freedom on a budget. The couple mentioned that they were surprised that their social media presence did not grow larger, but I think this was simply because they wanted to make more money. Matthew and Stacey were clearly adventurous and curious, but they made choices that were reckless for their environment. Basic safety precautions probably could have prevented their deaths. Even a free spirit is bound by the laws of physics. Enjoying freedom responsibly is the best way to continue enjoying it for a long time. Those are my thoughts on the case of Matthew Yeomans and Stacey Tourout. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. One thing I've found over the years when studying these stories on social media influencers is a lot of them have no idea what they're doing. That's why I think this case was refreshing. When looking at the videos of these two young people, Matthew and Stacey, it became really clear that they were very dedicated to what they were doing. When looking at Matthew specifically, he knew a lot about Toyota vehicles. I'm pretty familiar with them myself, although not as familiar as he was. And what he was saying about, like, the Toyota engines and transmissions, based on what I could see, he was correct almost every time. He had really studied the engines and the vehicles in general quite a bit. Years ago, I owned two Toyota Tacomas, Gen 1s. One of them had the same engine that Matthew used in his special build. Matthew would talk about this engine, and he was getting a lot right. He really seemed to understand its characteristics and what it took to work on it. For example, he knew that the engine was quiet. It uses a timing belt instead of a timing chain, which is how it achieves that particular low level of noise. So it was nice to see influencers who really seemed to know what they were doing. I particularly liked how curious and problem-solving oriented the couple was. There was one video where they were in the back of their 4x4 RV, and they were talking about all the changes they made to the interior, like to the countertop and other components. They really seemed quite practical. They really wanted to, in an affordable way, make improvements which would make their lives better on the road. They were sensitive to details that I think a lot of people would have missed. At least other influencers tend to miss these details. So they were really granular. They were looking at fine detail all the time. They weren't just talking in broad strokes. They weren't using grandiose language and pretending to know what they were doing. They really understood all the aspects of that vehicle. It really was a labor of love. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, perhaps some of the safety details escaped them, and that may have been just because they were so excitement-seeking. But in terms of knowledge, they were quite impressive. I really like Toyota trucks. I currently have a Tundra. I'm a little too old to be climbing under Tacomas and fixing them. I did have a more modern Tacoma just for a few days. When my Tundra was getting some warranty work, I had a Toyota Tacoma TRD. It was a 2025, a four-cylinder single turbo engine, if I'm not mistaken. It had an automatic instead of a manual. I would have preferred the manual. But it was a really interesting truck. It had all kinds of off-road equipment built into it. In driving it, however, I realized that I don't really want an off-road truck. I'm pretty happy with my Tundra. But it's interesting because I know that a lot of people really enjoy off-roading, and the Toyota seems to be a popular choice, the Tacoma specifically. Sometimes people use the 4Runner, and there are other Toyotas that have been made throughout the years as well, like the Land Cruiser, and there's even a current version of the Land Cruiser that's smaller. But either way, Toyota seems to be a popular brand for off-roading, and Matthew and Stacey really connected with that, and I could really see how that could lead to a large audience. I think a lot of people could look at that and see that there was a practical way to off-road on a budget, and this couple really offered a lot of advice in that vein. They paid attention to what they were doing, and they lived the life. They survived on a low amount of cash as they traveled to all these different countries. It's really tragic that their lives were cut short, but hopefully the lesson that is learned from that is to really pay attention to safety. That's something that this couple can teach people through the disaster that they experienced.